The Pediatric Lounge, a podcast taking you behind the door of the physician's lounge to get a deeper insight into just what docs are talking about today. From the clinically profound to the wonderfully routine and everything in between. Good morning, George. It's Tuesday morning again. We're with another fabulous guest today on the podcast.
Yes, we are. Today we have Dr. Igor Trojan. And his topic today is going to be the advantages and disadvantages of being a sole owner of a large medical practice. And we're going to talk about everything private practice.
Igor, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Herb. Thank you, George. I'm excited to be here.
Yep.
Igor, we always start out first by asking, why did you become a pediatrician?
Well, I always wanted to be a physician. My grandmother was a nurse. And I did a lot of volunteering in high school. In medical school, I really gravitated towards pediatrics. It's one of those things that you know you want to do it when you go on your first pediatric rotation. I enjoyed working with kids. I found I didn't enjoy working or treating adults. So it just came in very naturally for me.
You know what? It's very interesting. Every doctor you ask this question to, it's the same story. Mm-hmm. It's always the same story.
It's, you know it instantly. I would say, within a few days of a rotation, whether pediatrics is for you or not.
Yeah. The sad part of today is that I have medical students and I have yet to meet one that wants to go into pediatrics.
That's not true.
Just the one that you have.
Okay.
That's the only one. I'm talking about my medical students.
And she's got 177 on their listserv group. So they are out there. Igor, you have a very interesting life story. You were actually born in the old Soviet Union.
Yes.
And yes.
And so I left the former Republic of Moldova when I was 5. I lived in Athens, Greece for 7 years and arrived in New York City when I was 13.
Wow. And when you say the Republic of Moldova, is that the Moldova today or the Romanian Moldova?
It's the Moldova Republic today. So the capital, Chisinau.
Yes. You ever go back?
No, I have not had a chance to go back since I left.
Do you have any recollections of the communist world or you're too young?
Very, very few fleeting images. Most of my recollections are from growing up in Greece, and that was a very good experience.
Nice. And so then you did your medical school here, and you joined a established medical practice at a residency.
Correct. So during residency, I knew I didn't want to go into. I know I didn't want to be a practice owner. I always knew that I wanted to join a group and just basically be an employee. I did residency at the New Haven Children's Hospital, and it was a pretty difficult residency. So my wife vividly recalls when she mentioned to me, "I want to have your own private practice." I was like, "No, I want to have a regular, job, 40 hours a week, not have to worry about anything." So I joined a very large group in central New Jersey where I worked for 1.5 years.
And what precipitated your desire to change and open up your own office at that point?
So it was a very large group that had multiple locations. At that time, everybody was using paper charts. That was back in 2003, 2004. And, patients used to go from office location to location. Their chart never used to follow them. So every time you had to see a patient, you basically had to start from scratch. Also, that group had a lot of partners, and going to some of the partner meetings, you could see that not many things could be accomplished because everybody had their own point of view and ideas of how the practice should do things. So at that time, I said to myself, I can do this. So I started reading a lot about private practice from medical economics. The American Academy of Family Physicians had a lot of information, so I just started doing reading, and I decided to go solo a year and a half after finishing residency.
Well, do you regret having gone solo?
No, I think it definitely suits my personality. I know what I want to accomplish, and it was very hard in the beginning because I decided to open in an area that I thought would be there'll be a big demand for pediatricians, especially somebody who speaks Russian. But unfortunately, the area was very, very saturated with physicians. So it took quite a few years, I would say at least 4 or 5, until I could, make it into a successful,
Practice.
business.
So what'd you do in the meanwhile to sustain your life? You probably had a kid, a wife, a house.
Absolutely. So I opened my practice the day after my first child, my son, was born. And I quickly realized that, it would take years to build up a practice. So I joined a community hospital as a pediatric emergency room doctor. And I did that for 5 years. So I was working 2 nights a week, 12-hour shifts that were overnight, while working full-time in my practice. So I joked that my residency was not 3 years, it was more like 8 years.
Yes.
Because I was basically Q3 and a half every week for 5 years.
I guess what they say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously it was a great learning experience, and it was a very good way to build up your practice, because patients would see you in the emergency room, they liked your practice, they liked your style of medicine, they would ask you to have a private practice, and I said I did, and that's how we slowly grew.
Wow. And so you learned a lot. What would you say are as advice to people starting their own practice today not to do?
So I would say, first, you need to do your market research. You need to know how saturated the area is. You have to, if there's no pediatricians in town, you have a much better chance of succeeding. If there are multiple pediatricians, it's going to be an uphill battle to build up enough of a patient base to make it a successful business. It will take years and years. So you have to look at other sources of income while you're trying to make it succeed. The problem is that when parents move to the area, or when parents ask, who's your pediatrician, they always ask their neighbor or their friends who already have an established doctor. So you're at a huge disadvantage when you're starting from scratch. You have to differentiate yourself from other practices. And it takes a while until you have enough of a patient base that can refer you to their friends and neighbors. I think my advice to new graduates would be, see if you could join a solo practitioner, or somebody who's looking to retire, or a small group of maybe 2 or 3 providers that might be looking for somebody young who is going to join their practice and take it over from them. I think that would be a much easier and also much more secure way of doing it.
But you know what, Igor? That's the old school way of doing things.
Mhm.
All right. So there's going to be some kind of monetary money exchange or some kind of something. But the message on the street is that practices have no value. So I think that discourages physicians.
Which is absolutely false.
I know.
That is absolutely false. And there's a reason why a lot of venture capital are going into pediatrics, because they realize there's a huge value in medical practices, especially pediatric practices, which are significantly undervalued nowadays. The amount of money that you would have to pay to buy private pediatric practice is significantly less than if you were going to touch a dental practice or any other similar type of business that has similar gross revenue. So I think, if you're a recent graduate who's thinking of having their own practice, I will look into the community and see if there are any solo doctors that are looking to retire. And I think they'll be so excited to have you join them. And, that way you can learn, you have a mentor, you can see how things are done to see if this is something for you. It's a big commitment of having your own private practice. And, some people make it seem as though it's very easy, as though anybody can do it. And I say, well, it's similar to baseball. Everybody can play baseball, but not everybody can play minor leagues or major leagues. So it's, it takes years of experience and, hard work to make it a successful business,
Right.
and not a hobby that eventually, fails.
Yeah, but
So-
right now everybody's talking about this DPC model, and that's like private practice with cash, right?
That's right.
I don't get that. I really, because the logistics and the things that have to happen is exactly the same thing.
No, it's a lot different, but
Not really.
yeah, unfortunately, pediatrics, if you're on with insurances, is solely a volume business.
All right.
If you go DPC and you're actually paid what we deserve to be paid, then it no longer becomes a volume business. So
Okay.
you're not pushing to see 25 kids a day, 7 days a week. You're pushing to see 5-6 kids a day, and you spend the time that they need, and you solve a lot of problems over the phone. But they're paying a lot more than the insurance company is going to pay you. So it's not for everybody, but it's another, it's a free market. It's another way of doing things. I have friends in Miami who have concierge pediatricians. They pay him $3,000 upfront at the beginning of the year for the first child and $2,000 for the second. And he's a very limited practice, a pediatrician does. But if your kid's sick, he comes to your house. You text him. He says, "You want me to take a look at Johnny?" "Yeah, would you please? I think his ears are infected." "Sure, I'll be there in 15 minutes. He comes up, he looks at the kid. The mom doesn't have to leave the house with the 2 kids. And
But he does that through telemedicine, not in person.
No, he does it in person.
Yeah,
I
even
don't
in
believe
person.
it. I
He
don't
does it in
believe it.
person. He covers just a small section of South Beach. That's all he does.
But
That's for the ultra wealthy. That's not your average parent. But
Mhm.
that's another model. It's okay. I mean, there's got to be different models.
And Herb, with that model, you're always on call. You always at somebody's,
Beck and call.
exactly. I mean, they call you in the middle of the night. You have to get up out of bed and visit them in their
Yes.
home, because otherwise,
Yes.
if the one time you refuse them, they're going to drop you.
Yeah, talk
Yes.
about work-life balance.
Correct.
I like my balance.
But everybody is different, right? And if you do the math, if they're paying you $3,000 per kid, you got 100 kids in the practice, which is nothing, right? Nothing compared to a panel of 1,800 kids or 3,000 kids. You're making $300,000 with no overhead.
Correct.
Just
So
your malpractice.
I don't know.
But it's not for everybody, and you have to be in the right neighborhood. That's not going to happen in a immigrant-based neighborhood where they're on food stamps and Medicaid. You're not gonna find 5 patients who can pay that. So they're different models. But what are the disadvantages or challenges of being the solo owner of a big empire like yours versus being, like a large group practice or practice without walls?
Well, the advantages, let's start with that. So, if you have a clear vision and you know what you want to do, you can accomplish things, fairly quickly. As I said, my experience of working, with a large group and also seeing how other groups operate, usually if you have multiple partners, sometimes, their goals are not in alignment with yours. Some of them might be nervous at expanding or, doing things differently. So, a large group with multiple partners is like a marriage. And, we've all heard about stories where, some of those large groups can become very dysfunctional or they break apart. So there are definitely, disadvantages. If an opportunity presents itself or if something that needs to be done, it happens within, 24 hours. It doesn't happen through weeks and weeks of meetings and, going back and forth. The disadvantages, obviously, just because you're solo, everything, stops at you. So you have to make all the decisions. Sometimes, you have to rely on yourself to sort of bounce off ideas. I mean, obviously, you have, support groups and colleagues that you can ask for advice, but ultimately, you're the one responsible for the large organization. So there are definitely, challenges. You're on vacation. When I travel, I don't travel with one laptop. I usually travel with two laptops, just in case, my one laptop dies or, I always need to have access to what's happening. So, but I enjoy it. I enjoy knowing what's happening at all times in my practice, in my offices. My supervisors, my practice administrator always have access to me, and I like not only the medical aspect of pediatrics, but I like the business aspect of it as well too. I find it, very challenging and enjoyable.
Well, Igor, I admire you. Let's I'm going to push back a little bit though on this, because we're kind of like the same person, but I just have a good marriage, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm afraid to be, as you lose partners for your retirement, you could end up being the only one, which is fine.
Yeah.
But I don't like, I've told you this many times.
Yeah.
I don't like walking around with a target on my back. I want to have people around me to help deflect some of the problems. Like, it's just really hard because you have a big organ. If you have 17 doctors working for you, you got a big shop.
Yeah.
You got 17 personalities.
Yes.
Human resources, PCMH stuff, billing stuff, training stuff, payroll stuff, pension stuff, insurance stuff, contract negotiation stuff. The employed physicians, they just clock in, clock out, see a patient, go home.
Yes.
So I like partners, but the partners, they all have to do, we have, if we stumble upon an opportunity, I'll analyze and then I'll go to them and says, look, I think we have an opportunity here. Let's go. And they'll say, yeah, it's a good opportunity. Most of the time they'll say, yeah, it's a good thing. Let's go. I've had a couple of, not often, one or two things where I say, George, you're getting crazy. Slow down.
Yeah.
Which you have to respect that,
I guess Igor is good at delegating. He must have the right people.
I don't think he can delegate anything.
No, I do. I do.
I know him personally. He's a control freak.
No, yes, but you have to delegate. You have to surround yourself with people that you can trust. Obviously, you cannot delegate the most important things. Some of them, are so crucial, you have to do it yourself. But, otherwise you cannot function. I think with many of the physicians nowadays don't want to be partners or don't want to do the work that is required to be a partner. Some of them, do want the title or some of the financial gains, but either the lack of knowledge or the work ethic that is needed to be a partner. With the model that I've created is that over the year, I'm very big into owning the property where each of our locations are. I realized early on that renting is never a good idea. The landlord has very little incentive to do any improvements. And then when you're renting, subconsciously, you have very little incentive to do improvements in your space as well, just because you figure it's not yours.
Right.
And when you do pediatrics, you're doing it for the long term. So owning your own space, I think, is so crucial if you're a pediatrician or or a business owner. You may not be able to do it in the beginning, but as soon as you're able to afford it, I definitely encourage all the business owners to look and purchase their own space, whether it's a condo or a building, because you're building equity into something that you're going to be able to eventually cash out once you're ready to retire.
Yes.
And how do you
this is
manage?
another little conversation that Igor and I have all the time about this, where while I do agree with you, because we do own our original office, we do own it with the dentist and the rest of the partners. We moved out into a large space that there was no way you can own. You saw that office, Herb, in Comac.
Yeah, it's very large.
You could not buy that space. You could not even walk in to rent that space if you were not connected to some administrator or something that wanted pediatrics presence. And it's far nicer. I never showed you the call center, but that used to be our old office for 58 years. And indeed, it worked for 58 years. It probably should have been expanded many years ago, but we got landlocked, there was nowhere to go. And we came up with the thought process of, why don't we work on the stuff that we're good at and leave the other stuff which you're not good at, like fixing toilets and electric going down, to somebody else. But money-wise, you are correct.
Because when you own the space, you're building equity. So
you are correct.
Over the next 20, 30 years,
correct.
Even if your real estate does not appreciate in value a single cent, you would still have your mortgage paid out, and eventually, you can recoup what you paid for. That's a nice, retirement nest.
Yes, you're correct.
It's the same argument as whether it's better to rent the house you live in or buy the house you live in.
Yes.
And hands down, for most people, buying their house is a better deal. The challenge in pediatrics is that pediatrics is a very strange specialty. And some people buy a space that's too big and they go under because they can't manage the debt. Some people buy a space that's too small, and then they got to go rent because they need more space and they can't go too far away. So that, you never know what that's going to be. And as the neighborhood matures, which is just a life cycle, every neighborhood, the kids disappear. And in the big cities, at least, the younger families keep going further out and further out because housing's more affordable. So at some point, if you're growing a pediatric practice, you kind of start having to move out to another neighborhood to get the new patients. So that's a lot to manage when you're talking about a 30, 40-year investment. But hands down, just financially, that's a better option for any. It's tricky, but it's hands down. What I did find, and I'm curious if this is your experience too with hired physicians, is that when I had the urgent care center, nobody wanted to do an equity investment into it, physician-wise. And they weren't willing to go a month without a paycheck like partners do, simply because they were so burdened with student debt that the last thing they wanted to do was invest another penny in medicine. Do your physicians also express that?
To some extent.
What happened during COVID? Did they get their paychecks?
So yes. So so during COVID, we had to cut back our hours a bit when everything was shut down. But I think at that time we had 5 locations. So I'm sorry, 5, yes. So only one had to be temporarily shut down for a month, and then very quickly we're able to rebound. Telemedicine, we are already.
Who was the last guy to get a paycheck?
Well, me, because correct. So obviously,
So you took the risk. You took the risk.
Of course. Well, they are, as a business owner, there's always a risk. That's why you are the owner. I mean, the employees need to get paid first, and then you are the last one.
Yeah.
So
I had an argument with some physicians where it was like shortly after they started to open up a little bit and it was getting better. And I was still scarred by COVID and how we had to adapt, and we didn't take paychecks, and we put people on vacation and did all these things, and we risked a lot.
Mhm.
This guy was a hospital employed physician. He says, man, COVID was the best thing for me. I stayed at home and I got my paycheck.
Yeah.
And I got so angry with that mentality.
Yeah.
And, I got into an argument with him and my friend, who was a lifelong friend from medical school, got insulted because I insulted his friend in his house. And we got into a big tiff about this.
Mhm.
The hospital employee, well, I'm the business owner, and I took a bullet. And then this guy sitting, yeah, I got my paycheck and everything's okay for me.
That wasn't true for a lot of employed physicians, though.
Well, that's coming around now.
Igor, and
Yes.
how many offices, how many physical locations do you have now?
So currently we have 8. We are opening up our 8th location this Thursday.
Wow,
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And are all the 8 offices, are you an investor in the real estate?
Yes,
Or
I solely own every single.
so all eight practices function out of your real estate?
Correct,
Great.
as well as the call center as well.
All right, and you've separated the call center to somewhere else?
Correct. So we have a
Decentralized.
separate building where we have staff whose only priority is to answer phone calls. I think it's one of those great ideas that I would have.
I may have whispered that idea to you a couple of years ago.
And I know, and I think as a business owner, whether you're solo or in a group, it's very important to get out of your comfort zone and go to conferences, whether it's practice management conference, whether educational conferences. I think it's so important to talk to people, because the last thing that you want to do is become, complacent, and also think that you know everything, because you don't. And there are a lot of bright people out there who have better ideas than you do. So you have to listen to other people, and you have to ask yourself, does that idea work for me, and can I make it better? So, during one of the conferences, I talked to George, and at that time, we had noticed that there was very little incentive from the front desk staff to book extra appointments, because the more appointments to book, the more work it is for them, the more work it is for the front desk, the more work it is for the provider. And sometimes I felt like they would have been happy if we saw 5 patients a day, or even not see any patients a day, because their salary is not dependent on the volume of patients. And unfortunately, pediatrics is a volume-based business. People that tell you otherwise will fail. And during the conference that I went in Houston, I ran into several solo doctors who had significant financial difficulties. And when you ask them how many patients you see a day, they're like 10, 12, 13 patients a day. Well, I
get bored.
Well, not only that, but that you cannot survive in pediatrics. So what we did with our call center is we have it staffed with people whose only job is to make appointments. They have no disincentive not to book an appointment for an office if somebody wants to be seen. So that has allowed our volume to stay steady, and also allowed our practice to grow. Parents get very upset when they call an office and nobody picks it up, or they call an office.
I'm going to stop you there for a minute because the world's changing. You said something that is very interesting to me. Parents get very upset when they call and no one answers.
Yes.
How vital is that person answering that phone call, a human, not a decision tree, to the success of your empire?
I think it's crucial, and it doesn't have to necessarily be a phone call. We have texting as well too. We realize that many parents like texting, and we encourage people to text us as much as possible, because it is much easier for one person to answer multiple text messages at one time than to be on a phone call while the parent is thinking, which day might be good for them to bring in their 6-month-old for a well visit.
Right.
So everybody expects nowadays good customer service. They expect immediate service. So we really monitor the whole time of our patients on the call. And
Do you record the calls?
no, we do not.
Insurance?
We do not.
No.
But parents have so many options nowadays, so that if you don't pick up their phone call, especially if it's a new patient, they're going to call someone else. They're going to go to urgent care, they're going to go to a minute clinic. So you need to ask yourself, how much business are you losing by your front desk staff not answering phone calls in a timely fashion, or answering the phone call and saying, I'm sorry, we're busy, why don't you come in tomorrow or the day after, when your schedule actually could accommodate, several more patients.
So from a business perspective, would you ever try to push all your patients into the patient portal or the texting only to schedule the appointments?
No, I wouldn't necessarily push them, because there are some parents that do want to talk to a live human being. I think if you make it too computerized, you lose that human touch. So you have to give patients multiple options, and you let them choose which one works for them. I think some of the younger teenagers or young adults prefer texting. Some of the parents, do want to talk to a human person.
Yeah.
And then I say to you, you're absolutely right. Every missed phone call is a missed dollar in your pocket. But I say it a different way. Every answer phone is the opportunity to make $150. So, you'd be silly not to answer the phone and not to give people different options like online scheduling, texting, send me a message through the portal, so that you're meeting the customer where they're at. Someone at home freaked out over the kid's 103 fever, I don't think wants to go sign into a portal. But someone who's in a meeting, in a corporate board meeting, and the babysitter says, your son's got 103 fever, that person wants to text, say, kid's got 103 fever, I can't go to you now, but I can be there at 2. Can you fit me in? Right. So I think the more options you give them, the more money you make.
And also availability as well, too. Parents, want evening hours, they don't want weekend hours.
But doctors don't want that.
Of course. So sometimes, you have to, hire mid-level providers who are more enthusiastic about working, evening or weekends to, meet a demand. Because if you're not going to provide what your patients expect, they're going to go somewhere else. Our busiest times, and I think most pediatricians would agree, is afternoons, evenings, and weekends. That's when everybody wants to be seen.
Saturday's the biggest day of the week.
We would love to have hours 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, but then probably we would lose 40-50% of our volume if we did that.
Right.
So it's you have to ask yourself what your patients want from you, and they want availability. They want to have same-day access, and sometimes you have to stay later to see a kid whose mom called 10 minutes before closing time that the kid has an ear infection and screaming in pain, and they want to be seen.
Yeah, but Dr. Igor, what about my work-life balance? It sounds like I don't want to work for you because you're old school.
Well, it's irritating when somebody decides to walk in once you got your bag ready to go home.
It's irritating.
It's irritating. There's no way around it. But Igor's absolutely right. We're in the service industry.
But that's how you get the positive reviews.
I understand.
Igor stayed an extra 10 minutes and saved.
No, they won't give you any credit for that.
Yeah, they do. For that, they do. They remember that they do.
We are in the customer service business. So the bars don't open at 9 in the morning because no one goes to get a beer at 9 in the morning. They open after, for happy hour. And pediatrics has to be available when the parent's not working, because children's bills get paid by the parents at work. And they don't have a lot of disposable income. So taking the afternoon off of work and losing out on money at work to come bring the kid to the pediatrician is a double injury, right? You're not making money, and then you have to pay for the visit. So that's always been that way, and it's never going to be different unless we become a socialist country and people get a minimal wage sent to their house for not working. That's just the way it is.
But Herb, I always ask myself what I would do if I was in a parent's shoes. And my practice administrator has the same philosophy as well. So pretend you're the parent, first-time parent, you have a child who has 1 or 2 fever, you're nervous, you don't know what to do. What type of service would you expect from your pediatrician? And I think if you use that analogy, I think you're not going to go wrong.
But that's establishing a culture.
Yes.
Within the
correct.
practice. And that culture develops and grows over time. Now, I want to ask you, how do you go about, like when you interview a doctor and you tell me these things, and they'll tell you, well, I thought I'm going to work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, no call, and go home at 4 o'clock because that's what I can get from the hospital.
Well,
go to the hospital.
Yes, exactly. I mean, if you hire these types of providers, you're going to have a 9 to 5 practice. So, sometimes you have to pass along a good candidate because, their availability is not, works for you. Sometimes, you might be desperate. You might have a provider that left or a provider that's out on medical leave and you need somebody to fill their shoes. But then if you hire somebody who only wants to work 9 to 5, that can create, bad blood among the existing providers. Why is the new provider only working 9 to 5 while we have to do evening and, weekends? So, sometimes you have to pass along and look for the right person that fits your organization.
Yeah. You know what I wonder? I always wondered. So I hear this statement that, the hospital has this or the qualified health center, it closes at 4 and no weekends. Do their patients not get sick on the weekends and evenings? Where do they go?
To the ER, and the hospital owns it.
Urgent cares.
But I thought that the idea was to reduce the spend.
Not as long as the hospital owns it.
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care if I'm the hospital. I make more money when you come to the ER. Do well child exams on the qualified health center all day long, so I can meet the highest metrics for any quality incentives. Grow the panel so I can get the member per month from the state of New York on the Medicaid, and then send them all to my ER because then I get to charge them even higher, $1,200 for the viral panel.
Wow.
Love it.
Yeah,
it's a great model.
It's a great model
for spend.
But I'm going to get political again. That's what the Obama administration wanted. Full control of the big health systems. His dream was a bunch of Cleveland clinics, Mayo clinics that are totally, and Kaisers throughout the country. They totally control every aspect from the moment you are pregnant to the moment you die. And, they just rake in the dollars because there's these huge machines, not any different than Verizon or Comcast or whatever your local cable provider is. They have a monopoly. They charge what they want. They give you the service they want. And if you don't want it, you don't have cable in your house and you don't have a cell phone. Bye.
But Herb, a lot of physicians who do work for a hospital group, they're not necessarily happier there.
They're miserable.
I've interviewed quite a few of them, and they're having staffing shortages. They're understaffed with medical assistants. Their voice is not heard because the administration doesn't really care about what a pediatrician in a hospital clinic thinks. I've spoken to pediatricians that sold their practice to hospital groups, and
they hate it.
They hate it. Absolutely.
They hate it. We to your point, in your practice, if one of your physicians stayed for half an hour to see an ear infection, you lost money, right? After closing, you lost money because seeing one patient doesn't cover the overhead of that doctor and that front desk person and that medical assistant. But you would probably say, thank you so much for doing that. That's what we like. You're doing a great job. If a physician is employed by Stanford and she meets somebody in the parking lot, and then, at 5:15 p.m., she's going to get reprimanded, and human resources is going to come in and tell her that once the office is closed, she's not supposed to see patients. She's going to get in trouble for doing the right thing, for taking care of the patient, because it doesn't meet the need of the
System.
front desk people, the medical assistant, the administrator of the clinic, the boss of the administrator of the clinic. And so that's why they're miserable, even when they do the right thing and don't ask to be compensated for waiting for the patient, they get slapped.
Yeah.
That's no way to live. That's no way to be a doctor.
Correct.
That is the way to be Verizon or Comcast or whatever the monopolistic health system is around you, who just cares about squeezing every darn penny out of the customer and not about their journey or their health. So that's not right, but that's where they led us, and it's not been as successful as some people thought it would be. So Igor, you're very much into relationships, even though you don't want to be partners.
Yes.
You like to be like I like to be. I like to eternally date. We don't have to get married. But you say relationships do matter quite a bit. They matter with your physicians, they matter with your patients, but they also matter with your local bank.
Yes, absolutely.
How do you foster your relationship with your bankers?
So in the beginning, when I purchased my first office location, I had to get an SBA loan. And people who tell you that they don't have resources or finances to purchase their first location is not accurate, because with an SBA loan, the minimal requirements to get it are really negligible. So you can purchase your first office space as long as you've been in business for a couple of years and you have a decent profit. You can purchase your first practice location, and you have. But after that, you need to go to your local bank. You need to introduce yourself to the manager, and the more business you give them, the more they get to know you, and the more they're willing to finance your future projects. So obviously, the first several purchases of our office locations was more challenging, but after a while, they have all your history. They know that you are doing things right, and they're more than happy to lend you the money to have you succeed.
Yeah.
So our last office location, we closed on our 7th office location in middle of April of this year. 2 weeks later, a provider sends me her resume looking for a job. I look at her resume, and she has a solo practice that she's planning to close and work for me. So the easiest thing for me to do would be to hire her as an employee, and that's it. But I look at her resume and ask her, why are you closing practice? Well, I'm having financial difficulties. I cannot succeed as my own solo practitioner. I looked at her gross, and I realized very quickly there is a potential for another office location. So obviously, she was renting. She was paying a lot of money for rent, crazy amount of money for rent. And I started looking for a location within several miles from her current place to see where we can move her practice. I find a location, and I purchase it, and I call my TD Bank, and we were able to close on a commercial loan in 2 weeks.
Wow.
2 weeks.
Now, just out of curiosity, because you have a lot of cash flow, do you diversify? Do you have 2, 3 banks, or just one bank?
In terms of commercial mortgages, I stick with one bank because they have all my information.
Okay.
And it just, I mean, for bank accounts, we do have several, so that way, everything is FDIC insured.
Yeah.
But in terms of, getting mortgages, we'd stick with one bank.
Okay.
It's all about relationships. And,
Yeah.
once you get big enough, you don't work with a branch manager, you work with a vice president for healthcare at that division. So things can get done quickly. I mean,
Yeah.
as I said, we closed in a commercial, property, north of $750,000. We closed it in 2 weeks. We were able to get
Wow.
everything done. I mean, it's even the bank was surprised how quickly we were able to close.
And then
Do you
starts
get-
the build out.
Do you get a little nervous when you take over one of these solo practitioners that is not doing well, that they're too stuck in their ways to be able to succeed?
So that's a good question. You have to interview them and see if their practice style is similar to yours. If the philosophy and the treatment style is similar, the practice will succeed. A lot of the times, some of the solo practitioners that join our group join us is because they don't want to manage the day-to-day operations. They're looking to sort of do more clinical medicine and leave the management to someone else. Sometimes it's because they have they don't have the business skills to be able to manage the operation. If you're not careful at your bottom line, if you are just not billing out claims or billing incorrectly, it's very easy to make a business fail.
Yeah.
So
Do you bring these, hold on one second. Do you bring these guys in under one tax ID number under Ivy League Pediatrics, or do you keep
Ivy Pediatrics? Yes, under one tax ID.
much better? Yeah.
Yes, under one tax ID. If a physician has a huge population of patients who refuse vaccines, obviously, that's not a good fit for us. If they, overprescribe antibiotics, that's not a good fit for us too. So, you have to talk to them and see what's their practice style and whether, it will be a good fit, for your group as a whole. We just don't take anybody who is interested in joining Ivy Pediatrics.
So basically those guys, they continue in their building and you just take over, but you have to have some exchange of some money.
Yes. Well, so most of the providers that joined our practice were renting. So we had to move their location to a new location that obviously we owned. So we don't rent anymore. So
Even at the beginning?
even at the beginning. So let's say, George, you would approach me and say, Igor, I want to join Ivy Pediatrics and you're renting. I would start looking immediately within 2, 3, 4 mile radius of where you are to see if there is a medical condo or a medical building that we could move your practice to. And chances are there are locations where you can move. I mean, sometimes a little bit more challenging, but finding an existing medical space that's already built out is a lot more economical than starting build out from scratch, because nowadays you're looking at 6 to 9 months worth of construction time.
Do all the practices look alike or similar or theme?
Oh, yes. So, I mean, the layout is different.
Yeah, the colors on the walls.
But in terms of the way they are organized, it's the same. We use the same computers, same filing system, same equipment. So that makes it simple.
And you have a lot of backups. You alluded that you travel with 2 laptops.
Mhm.
So anything that's mission critical, you have at least one, if not two backups?
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
You never want to be in a situation where your laptop fails. So I always travel with two laptops, a hotspot as well. And fortunately nowadays, you can get good reception pretty much everywhere. So we always, one of the things I learned, Herb, is you need to have backup for backup. I think a lot of providers do not invest in their equipment that they're using. For example, we know that without a fridge, we cannot do any well visits. If a fridge fails, good luck getting a scientific fridge within 2-3 weeks. It's almost impossible. So each of our offices has scientific quality fridge and freezer for backup. So in case something happens, we just move the vaccines from one fridge to another. Many times it's not being used. It's just there maybe for overflow vaccines when we get the flu vaccine in the fall. But each office has 2 fridges because we realize that, no fridge means no well visits or no shot visits, and that would be problematic.
So that's one of the advantages of having the cash flow that you have.
Well, it's also planning.
Yes, but if I'm a solo practitioner grossing 700,000 a year, I'm taking a salary, but there's not a lot of extra for these backups. But when you multiply that times 20 and maybe a little more because it's more efficient, then there's money for these backups, which allow you to be prepared for things that are unexpected, but that do happen. So you have generators, backup refrigerators. You can also shift around, right? If
Yes.
for whatever reason one office is short in varicella vaccines this morning, you personally yourself can drive from one office to the other and deliver the vaccine so they can keep seeing patients. Which if I'm a solo practitioner, I got to call Henry Schein and wait for them to process it. And if it takes a week, it takes a week. I can't see 12-month-old visits.
Yeah. You know what? I think I finally figured out Igor's financial model.
That's
actually pretty smart.
Yeah.
So he gets a practice that, whether it's good or whether it's bad, it will generate income and probably be self-sufficient. He has the infrastructure and the knowledge on how to manage this.
Yes.
So he buys the building. The practice basically pays the mortgage over time.
Correct.
Then the doctors are working and everybody's getting paid. He's providing work for people. So he's doing a good social thing. And at the end of the day, if there's some extra money, that's even better.
Yes.
And then in 20 years, all these things get refinanced and remortgaged. And heck, my father made all this money from real estate.
Correct.
Yes.
It's the McDonald's model. You don't make profit by selling a burger. You make a profit by owning the land where the burger is being cooked.
That's kind of smart.
It's very smart.
Correct. So when you're purchasing a practice that is underperforming, your goal is to break even. And even in practices where I thought, oh my God, it's going to take many years to build it up. If you're providing good service and you're available within a year or two,
it makes money.
It makes money because there are always going to be kids. They're always going to be getting sick. So if you're providing good service, the practice will grow. And I think that's why it's so important to provide good customer service, because we all know that a happy patient maybe will tell a few of their friends,
Right?
And a happy one will tell their whole neighborhood.
Yes. Now I wonder, do you, as Dr. Igor, do you have a home base, a patient panel, a schedule every day?
So I don't work every day. I try to put myself on the schedule once or twice a week. Sometimes I will work 3-4 days a week if somebody's out.
That's the next question.
So you do have to cover. I mean, if I'm not working and somebody called out sick last minute, I'm not going to have that office close and reschedule all the patients. I will actually go to that location and work that shift, which is good because I'm making sure then that everybody is functioning the way I expect that location to function. So I don't look at it as a negative way when I have to go and cover last minute. I look at it as an opportunity to see how is the office operating, what tweaks, what adjustments need to be made so that it works better.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
And then you also say that one of the key critical mission things for you is the voice over IP.
Correct. So several years ago, we decided to go with voice over IP because when you have regular landlines, you're limited by the number of phone calls you can get at one time.
Right.
So if you have 5 lines, at most you can get 5 people calling at the same time. With voice over IP, you can have 1 line and 1,000 people calling at the same time, and they're not going to get a busy signal. Also, what voice over IP allows us to do is that, yes, we have a call center, but many times the call center cannot answer every single phone call that arrives. So when that happens, the phone calls bounce to all our office locations, and we expect our staff there to pick up the phones. So yes, we have 8 office locations, but ultimately it's one practice, and there's no reason why location number 7 cannot answer any questions or make an appointment for location number 1 or location number 2, or create a referral or send a message to the provider to refill a medication. So this is how you utilize technology in making sure that you provide good customer service.
Great.
I think that's the difference between a big system and an independent operation, because he thinks how to make the life better of the physician that's working or the practice people. Whereas at a hospital system is so bloated that they just make life more complicated. You know how many people come to us because they can't get through the first phone call to make an appointment?
Yeah, or nobody picks up, or nobody picks up,
or you get the orthopedist. They all use the same, but they have a call center too.
Yeah.
But it's next to impossible to get appointments.
So you utilize technology to your advantage and making sure that you provide good customer service. I mean, all our offices have their own phone number, local, that patients have been used to calling for years. So if I'm purchasing a practice, I make sure that I get the phone number that the parents are used to calling for many years. We get it text enabled, so parents can text us. Obviously, we have a portal where patients can request appointments or refills or referrals. So you utilize technology. Speaking of technology, we also have backup computers in our business office. So let's say one of our computers fails today. Well, we're not going to be in a situation where that room is not functional. My business manager will just go pick up a computer, drive it to the office, and swap it. So that way we have as little downtime as possible.
Right.
We also have hotspots in each of our office locations as well too. So in the remote chance, we lose internet, we have Wi-Fi backup. So at least we can connect a few of the computers. We are cloud-based EMR, so it's important for us to be able to access our system.
Yeah, the cloud base is good. What EMR do you have?
Office Practical.
Oh, that's right, Office Practical.
Yeah.
I forgot.
Yeah. We are starting to.
It's a good product. We have the same
absolutely. One. We also starting to get generators for each of our office locations. So at least for the critical ones. So our call center is on a generator. So that is our nerve center. It has also 2 different internet providers. So in case one fails, we have an automatic failover. So phone calls can always get answered. Appointments can be made.
Yeah, but you have to be careful with these things, with all these accounts and all these bills. They start to blend, and you don't even see them anymore. And you pay for phone line. I remember when we did our consolidation of phone lines, when we did the call center and we moved numbers, I found phone lines that were in the wall that we were paying for like 15 years that nobody knew about.
But we use internet, so we use
Yeah.
voice over IP.
Yeah.
So,
But you still have phone numbers.
well, but they have voice over
Yeah.
IP. So it's I try to calculate the cost if we lost internet for one day in our call center.
Oh yeah.
Yes, the phone calls would bounce to each of the office locations, but how many of them would get answered? So
No, it's very important.
And how frustrated will our parents be if they had to wait of an hour or an hour and a half to get the phone calls answered?
Yeah.
So unfortunately, in business, you do have to make hard decisions, and you have to invest in your infrastructure. I think it's so important.
That's more important than anything.
I think that's the biggest advantage of your model is you can invest in the infrastructure. A smaller practice doesn't have the finances to do that. And then they do get into the disaster where, a computer doesn't work. They have to close down a room, and lose the revenue from that room.
Well, Igor is 8 smaller practices.
Yes.
Yeah,
He proved it to work.
Yes.
What's the difference? His brain, that's all.
Yeah,
He's willing to work hard.
He's willing to work, his connections, his risk tolerance, because he's going to, put out money to get that extra computer as opposed, how many people have Windows 95?
Yes.
Yes. Or a little laptop in the room. That's just so frustrating.
Yeah, no, you need a hard station, hardwired everything.
Or even scarier is using a regular residential fridge to store your vaccines.
Yeah.
Storing $50,000 worth of products in a little $300-400 fridge that you bought at Home Depot, and you're using data loggers that don't communicate through Wi-Fi or through phones to let you know what's happening with the vaccines.
So now I have a big question for you. How is your work-life balance?
Actually, pretty good nowadays.
Well, you don't see patients like me, so it should be easy. I know.
I do. I do.
teasing.
What is sometimes frustrating is, when you're seeing patients, you still have to deal with, the business aspect of medicine. So your phone is constantly, vibrating with messages, and you have to okay, let me quickly look at them, but I'll respond to them during lunchtime or afterwards. But it's, it's challenging. Yes, the work-life balance sometimes can blend because you can never truly go away on vacation and not think about, your practice. You always
That's true of any business owner.
correct.
I mean, if you're the CEO of Apple, you're on vacation, you're worrying about this, you're worrying about that, and that's just that comes with the territory. You want to be the boss, life doesn't stop.
Correct.
But if you don't want to, you can just go get a job.
Yeah. So that's where having good partners comes in, I think.
Yes.
Because I've watched you at conferences, you're constantly at the office texting. I'm paying attention, but I got my partners back in the office. But it's the same thing at the end of the day.
So it's a different strokes for different people.
Different model.
Well, Igor, this is very enlightening. I'm very delighted at your success. And
he has one last question before he goes. What advice would you give to a new graduate in terms of private practice and the future?
So
other than coming to work for you.
Well, again, if I had to start over again, what I would do is I would find a solo doctor, work for them several years, learn about, the business aspect of medicine, and then eventually take over their practice, because there are still many solo doctors that don't know what to do with their practice. They might be within a few years of retirement and nobody wants to take over their practice. And some of them are forced to either close the practice. We've had, several practices that reached out to us and say, can you please take over my practice? Obviously by that time, the practice was so small that it wasn't worth it for us to open another location. So we had to absorb their patients or their charts. But The biggest fear of a solo practitioner is what to do with their practice, when they're ready to retire. Reach out to the community. I think it's so important to get to know the solo practitioners. If you want to go into private practice, is find someone that has similar philosophy, work for them for a few years. Yes, you can purchase the practice from them, or sometimes they might just give it to you for free. You might just work for a few years, get some sweat equity into it, and they'll be more than happy to leave you their practice and legacy.
It's better than closing it down, right?
Yes, correct. And that actually,
It's happening more and more.
Yeah.
People don't, they didn't plan right, and they can't find someone to replace them. Well, thank you so much for your time, Igor. It's great to see you.
Herb. Thank you, George.
Hopefully, we'll see each other somewhere soon in person.
Absolutely.
All right.
All right.
Great to see you. Thanks for your time.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. This has been a production of the Pediatric Lounge. On the show notes, you will find links to our co-host and other important notes, as well as a timetable of the topics discussed today. Don't forget to follow us on social media and subscribe to wherever you listen to your podcast. Leave us a great review, as it helps us greatly. In the meantime, we will see you next week. The Pediatric Lounge. The conversations are not intended as medical advice, and the opinions expressed are solely those of the host and the guest.